Hello everybody, this is my MTD 28cc weed whacker engine that I've been converting over to fly with an RC airplane. I plan to put it on a giant Super Sportster. I've got a degree wheel on there for measuring the intake and exhaust timing, and motor mount I made out of 1/8 inch sheet aluminum, bolts to the back. The muffler I eventually plan to replace with a tuned pipe, and I'm going to show you a few things that I did to the inner workings of this thing. As you can see, right away the carburetor or the flywheel is shaved, and about the only thing I could do with this stock carburetor was polish it. I polished up the inside. I took all the burrs out of it that came with the casting. Other than that, I'm going to tear this thing apart and show you everything I did to it. I removed the carburetor. The back plate. Back plate also removes the motor mount. As you can see there, these are actually reed valve engines. It's got a reed valve connected to the back plate. It takes the guesswork out of timing, from what I understand. But it also, and then can reduce the maximum horsepower a two-stroke can produce. But these things, I've got another one built already, and it's stock, powering a Super Decathlon, and it has plenty of power for basic aerobatics and a heavy airplane, which weighs about 18 pounds. Take up. Now this here is going on a plane I hope to weigh about 14 pounds, and I've done a lot of internal work on it. Hopefully, maybe I can get this thing to do possibly 3D. One thing that I want to show you that I'm pretty proud of is the inside. I have packed the crankcase with an unbelievable 13 cc's of epoxy putty. I did it in 3 steps. First, I packed the bottom with the piston cylinder installed, and I actually used the crank to moving it around to form up the bottom of the putty, so the packing is form fitted. You will notice that when this back plate is installed, the crank clears the reed valve. Also, the epoxy putty is smoothed out toward the back plate, and the way I did that was using petroleum jelly smeared all over the back plate. I installed it, and then I pressed the epoxy putty and formed it in place. That notch in the back is required to install and remove the piston rod from the crank. Without that, you can't get it out. Rolling this over, there's only maybe 10,000ths of an inch between the rod and the putty, the crank and the putty, moving up. Next, I want to show you the exhaust port. I've widened that up to just about 72% of the width of the piston. And increased the timing quite a bit. I've got 143 degrees of exhaust timing, and I figure originally it was probably about 130 degrees of exhaust timing. I also polished the opening and went for an elliptical top. If I had to do it over again, I would have given the bottom of that an elliptical shape also. I'd say this exhaust port is probably at least 50% larger than what it was. I've taken about 40 thousandths off the top, and I should have measured the width too, but like I said, I probably went from 50% to 72% on the width of the piston. Moving along, I used this gasket to mark the outer areas of what I can remove from the block. And currently it looks to be possibly upside down. These are directional, yes. So I used a marker and I marked around where I could remove metal from this block. And then if you look closely at the top of the piston, I marked where the pins are at on the piston that keeps the rings from moving around inside of this piston and getting caught in the ports. Stock piston and rod. That is directional. If you put it in backwards, you're going to be sorry. It's hard to get out. Going back to the packing, if you look inside of there, you can see grooves. You can see grooves in the packing material I put in there. It's epoxy putty. It's very hard, strong stuff. If you look along the sides, I cut out all the rough casting that didn't match up with the cylinder and smoothed that out using emery cloth and a file and also a Dremel drill with the cutting tools. So with the epoxy putty in there, I'm 13 cc's less in the crankcase than stock. Looking at the cylinder, I actually poured it out the cylinder before I poured it out the block, or cut open the block. And I did the same thing with the cylinder. I lined up the gasket and I painted around the block or the cylinder the far reaches of where I want to cut. Right along there and there. And then, if you've got a Ryobi, you're going to notice that my ports are round. They're directional, which means they are pointing towards the front of the cylinder, rounded on the edges, and they're also voluted to reduce air turbulence as it goes in. And that there, you cannot cut it out. It's preventing the piston from rocking. But I did thin it out. It's about a millimeter thick is all now. It started out around a millimeter and went up to probably 2 millimeters. And again, I did that with a file, mostly a rat tail file and a Dremel drill. To cut all of that out. That port towards the index finger there is probably about 25% wider, just using a rat tail file and the Dremel drill. It's rounded on the edges instead of square. It's voluted, and the timing has not been changed on any of these ports. If you look at the front port, did the same thing. I used a rat tail file and I dug that out all the way down, and then I also dug it out along the back there, made that whole thing rounded. You can see there's no sharp edges until you get to the top. Then using a Dremel drill, I cut into the front of the cylinder, extending that port quite a bit. If you'll notice, the width is about twice as large, but the depth isn't there. And what I'm hoping to achieve is a part where the fuel comes in and it angles this way, but also shoots straight up the cylinder to aid it in clearing up the cylinder better. Here's an inside view of the rear port. Now, these front ports is where the markings on the piston became very important. I looked through the spark plug port and eyeballed as I was cutting away those front ports to ensure that I left plenty of room for the rings not to get stuck in there and really screw up the engine. You will notice that after I got done cutting the exhaust port, I brought the rear port, transfer port for fuel and air, back as far as I could towards the exhaust port. If you'll notice, that line there And the cylinder wall bends back just a little bit. And there is about 1 millimeter left of metal. But I did that using the rat tail, the back edge there. For the most part, and took it all, moving it back that way. And by doing that, I rounded out the back port there and then moved this wall back and increased the area of that transfer port a good amount. You can kind of see where that bevels a little bit. That used to be a sharp edge. So that's, I probably took about 1 millimeter off, maybe 1.5 millimeters off that back wall, increasing the area of the back transfer port via that method. And these transfer ports have been polished. I haven't polished inside of here yet, but those will get polished too. The compression is standard. I thought about changing that, but not on this engine, not at this time. So there you have it. A pretty radically modified engine. The intake ports have 110 degrees of timing. The exhaust port was increased to 143 degrees of timing. I could probably take it up to 150 without too many issues. If I take it to 160, 170, it's probably definitely going to require a pipe and also a smaller prop. The torque will go down, but at the maximum horsepower will go up with RPM. So swinging a smaller prop at higher RPMs is possible. But for this, I probably want a fairly large stick on the nose. It took me about a month of tinkering with this engine here and there to achieve this point. That's about it for the modifications to this engine. I've got a propeller hub on order from Jag Engines. He specializes in retrofits and conversions to aircraft use. He's got prop hubs, he's got engine mounts, he's got mufflers, he's got prop hubs that will convert this over to a CNH ignition, which I might eventually do, but for now I'm going to use the magneto that's on it. He's got a large array of supporting parts for this engine in particular. And again, that's Jag Engines. not sure if this is going to come through in the video, but I have some scoring on my piston and some wear on the piston skirt. You can see the dark line right there. Another line right there where I had some scoring on the skirt. I initially had at one point 8,500 RPM. Able to record 8,300 pretty consistently on the first startup. The second startup, with the stock muffler and everything on there, I was able to attain 6,900, which is far below the 8,300 I had on the initial startup. I removed the stock exhaust and was able to get 7,500 with just a straight out pipe, or no exhaust pipe at all. But boy, it's still not the 8,300 I had originally with an 18.6 prop. Anyhow, I attribute this to not cleaning up my my ports good. I should have run emery cloth around them. I used a polishing stone on my Dremel to try to clean up my ports, but apparently that didn't do it. Also, along here on the exhaust port side, there's like pitting on between the crown and the top ring. But I'm going to use some emery cloth around the ports, clean everything up, round off the ports that keep the piston from rocking in the cylinder, and see if I can stop the wear that's happening along the skirt. And then from there, I'm hoping that if I clean up the transfer ports with the emery cloth, I'll stop the scoring and hopefully get a reliable engine. This engine, the way it is not going to last much longer. As you can see, I had a significant drop between the first run and the second run. Maybe 20 ounces of fuel run through it. But I keep messing with it. Not done with it yet. It was pretty depressing. I put it down for a few days, but I'm going to pick it up again and clean it all up, start it up again here in a few days, and see what I come up with.